You're watching the Battered Fans Network.
Welcome, everybody, to episode number 4 of the Battered MLS Fans Podcast. I am your host, Daniel Granada, and as always, we are joined, usually joined by a panel of 5 podcast MLS creators and podcasters and content creators. Look at me, I'm already slipping up. But unfortunately, we were one short, but we still have a panel of 4 people, so let me bring them on one at a time. First off, second time already in 4 shows coming on, Mr. Todd Lewis. How are you doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing fantastic, Danny. After that 4-2 Philadelphia Union victory over FC Cincinnati on Wednesday night. So who would have saw that coming? So Philadelphia Union fans doing fantastic.
For sure. And then let me bring on Joe Shaw, no stranger to the Battered Network. And Joe, like I said, MLS content creators, but Joe is a very unique person because he also does throwbacks. Yep. If you haven't already, make sure that you catch the Miami Fusion 25 for 25.
Yep.
25 for 25 right. Podcast where he goes into the history of the Miami Fusion. He's got the Human United FC, and he is he corrected me earlier today, FC Dallas supporter. Joe Shaw, how are you doing, sir?
Man, I'm doing great. It was a goal of mine when I came on the show that I wanted to bring the drip fits, right? So I gotta hold on. We got a 1996 Dallas Burn original. And hold on one sec.
Oh.
Did you see it? Did I not turn around all the way? It's Hugo Sanchez on the back.
Oh, you got the Sanchez in the back.
There we go. Here, hold on a second.
You got Joe Shaw coming out drippy today. And, you know, it's funny you bring this up because our last guest, I was just talking about 96 kits with because I really want and I told you, Joe, we were talking about it before, how I really want a New York Metro Stars kit to come back. So without further ado, let me bring on from the designated pundits, Mr. Bob Ventimiglia.
Yeah, that's close enough. We'll roll with that. Bob Ventimiglia, right. The designated pundits. You can also find me on the Bet US Major League Soccer show.
Bet. Well, Bob, thank you for joining us. And what did you think about Joe's a throwback kit there? Because I thought that was a thing of beauty. Not as nice as the Metro Stars, but
yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I do like it. It kind of reminds me a little, of the old school Brimstone Cup, one of the derbies that's long forgotten in Major League Soccer between the fire and the burn. Kind of reminiscent of that. I grew up in the 90s, and I don't really have the nostalgic love that a lot of other people do for this stuff. So I'm not really like a kit guy. I like the modern. I'll stick with the modern, LAFC, just black with the gold stripes. I like that the best.
I like all the gimmicky stuff. Like, give me the gene washed kit. Like, give it to me all day. I'm a kit guy. I waste way too much money on it. But going from this kit to talking about, I guess, the news of the day, the U.S. men's national team, and this wasn't part of the topic or the show sheet originally, but this is the topic of the day, so we should get into it. The U.S. men's national team finally got their coach or their manager. We have Mauricio Pochettino. I always mess up his name. But he is what I think checks off most of the boxes, what people were looking for as far as a name, experience in Europe, experience with star players. How are you guys feeling about the hire? I'll start here on my bottom. Todd, how are you feeling about the hire?
Yeah, I think it's probably the biggest name that the U.S. could have attracted. I think it was such a long shot for them to go out and potentially get a Jurgen Klopp, or you always had your fans that said, oh, try to tempt Pep Guardiola to leave Manchester City. And neither one of those moves were ever going to happen. And I think U.S. soccer fans have to come to reality, right? Where this job, in my opinion, just not that attractive. And if you can't attract the top managers, then I think the fans need to lower their expectations and, look at the middling managers. And that's what I would consider Pochettino, a middling manager. Fantastic at Tottenham, even though they didn't win a trophy. He had some fantastic teams there, went to the Champions League final against Liverpool, ultimately lost that. He goes to P Money Sign G, and wins 2 trophies there. But honestly, I mean, with Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe, should have done a lot more there. And then his Chelsea spell at the beginning wasn't the greatest, but towards the end of the season, we saw them start to turn it around and everything. And Chelsea, like they do with everything, just after a year, they just move on. And it is interesting, though, that both now Emma Hayes and Pochettino are both with U.S.
Chelsea?
Federation, both former Chelsea managers. Yeah.
Bob, how are you feeling about the hire?
I like it. I agree. I think it's about the best we could have expected, kind of the best we could have asked for. And with these things, it's not only a matter of the best player, the best coach available, or the best coach available who will coach your team, which are 2 big obstacles, but sometimes the timing just needs to be right. Things need to fall into place. I think, maybe Jesse Marsch, if in another universe somewhere, he'll be coaching the U.S. men's national team sometime soon. I know he mentioned that, that team is a bit of a mess, but this is a more exciting name than Jesse Marsch, and everyone would have, was stomping their feet yelling, why couldn't we get Jesse Marsch last window? So I think that this is, things fell in our favor this time. If we didn't go with Berhalter another few months, it wouldn't have been Pochettino. So I think, we have to look forward to that. And, as far as everyone on Twitter, you're not going to make everyone happy. No one's going to be happy. I've already heard people complaining, why couldn't we get someone like Pochettino last window? Shut up. Just be happy. Be happy with a nice thing that we have. I'm going to be remembering the Berhalter years with fondness. He took the U.S. men's national team through a whole lot, won a lot of trophies, beat Mexico, won a lot of dual nationals over the squad.
And
now it's time to turn it over.
Grow.
Yeah, watched it grow, and now it's time to hand off your baby and hopefully put up a good World Cup performance in 2 years.
Joe.
Yeah, so I'm pretty high on this selection, and for me, it's a couple of factors, right? I think if you think about life and any career movement or hire or anything that you want to do, it always comes back to who do you know in your network. We think about the fact that Matt Crocker overlapped with Poch, right? They had that connection, so yeah, it would have been great to get Klopp. I think that was a pie in the sky. Like, we got to try, we got to see, right? See if he's kicking the tires or not. When that wasn't going to happen, it became who's in the network, what do we want to do with this team at this World Cup, and how do we want to leave a lasting legacy where people are wearing the jerseys on a podcast 20, 30 plus years from now talking about this team, right? Just like Danny's doing right now. So for me, he ticks a lot of boxes, and I was a little hesitant at first when I thought about his club career, like Todd was talking about, right? All of the different spells where he may have been exciting, but not necessarily winning anything. And then I sat back and I went, tournament football, tournament soccer is a whole different beast. And for me, a lot of the question marks existed in his club game. And if we think about the positives where he was able to turn a young core at Espanyol, I believe, and he was given the keys by Bielsa and was able to have a lot of momentum in a relatively short amount of time. And he's coming into a core that knows each other and is primed. The pump is primed, right? For some exciting opportunities. I think the table is set for him to come in and maximize. And if he fails and it's Klinsmann 2.0, as I saw somebody on Twitter talking about before, then so be it. But you got to try, and you got to get people excited. It's a home World Cup. You got to do what you can to shoot for the stars. So I'm excited, and I like to see what he's going to put together.
I mean, you knew that they were going for a name, right? Klopp,
yeah.
Vieira was another one, Pochettino. I feel like you got the name. You have nobody on the U.S. men's national team is playing the MLS. They're all playing in Europe. So you want somebody that has experience coaching those players in Europe. And then I did hear a lot of people, what has he won? He only coached that Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe team for 1 year. We don't know what he would have done if he would have had that same core of players more than a year. He won the League One in France. I know that PSG should win that every year regardless, but he won. And then I think what he did with the Spurs was a big deal. Mr. Krabs said the Spurs has never won anything. He took them, I think they were runner-up in the EPL 1 year. They finished third place in another. And then to make it to the Champions League final, like everybody's like, but they win. I'm sorry, nobody's penciling in the Spurs making it to the Champions League. That's literally the biggest final in club football. And to make it there, I understand that they didn't win. And I think they lost, was it on a handball in the box where they gave a penalty kick? Like that I thought he punched above his weight a lot of the time with the Spurs. I'm excited about it.
And no other coach in this availability has that on their resume, who's coached in those high pressure situations, who's had to make those difficult decisions. So, I mean, it's a no brainer. Just please be happy for what we have. We don't need to, again, we don't need to be negative about every little thing. Let's just be happy. We got a great coach. We're not going to see him in any meaningful tournament before the World Cup, but, we could watch him beat up on some Caribbean nations and maybe, pull up some players abroad outside of our top 11.
And Francisco Garcia saying Scaloni had nothing to show before he was selected for Argentina gig.
Yeah. And I there's a couple things too as well, just building off of what Bob said that I think is really critical is, we have the Gold Cup that's not anything, right? But there is the talk about expanding it and inviting more exciting teams to make it more of a competitive tournament. I hope that is true and it is able to work out. The other thing too is, I saw one of the comments talk about, a lot of our players that play in Europe or are in Europe don't really play, or they're young, or, right here. But Poch's track record with players who are hungry for the development and the playing time and are eager to learn and be molded, that's his bread and butter. We talked about PSG. He was never really going to do anything with Neymar and Messi and Mbappe, right? It's like they're who they are. They're going to play what they're going to play, and they may accept little to no coaching. So I think him coming into this situation, I think is going to motivate a lot of players to up their game, to get that playing time in Europe, and to really show out for a coach that, they might want to impress, who might have a gig at a Champions League winning team in the near future.
Yeah, and I think that's really what the difference is going to be now, because we knew under the German, what was his name? Klinsmann, thank you. Under Klinsmann, it was, you must play abroad. You will not be on this team, right? So then players started making silly transfers to, like, Matt Miazga was never going to make it in Chelsea. He was always going to be loaned out immediately, stay in Major League Soccer, or make a smaller move somewhere overseas if you must go. So I'm really interested in seeing what Pochettino's philosophy is. I assume he's going to be a no Major League Soccer unless, to fill out some youth spots. But I need to see the emphasis on starting every day. You're not just going to go to the best club that'll have you. You need to go to the best club that'll have you and give you regular minutes.
I think he's an aggressive manager also. Go ahead, Todd.
I was going to say, I think that's a big thing, right? Is like, you guys mentioned it, how there's no meaningful major competitions left for the U.S. And hopefully the U.S. do get bigger clubs coming to the Gold Cup. Because for me, in my opinion, it's like, the Copa America was a failure on all fronts for the U.S. because this was going to be your last chance to play these meaningful games. And with the way that the schedule is with Europe, with South America, it's hard to schedule those friendlies against these top countries. And, the biggest knock on Greg Berhalter was against meaningful opponents. Where's the wins to show for it? And they weren't there. And I do think that the U.S. are a little bit hindered by playing in CONCACAF because, let's face it, there's nobody in CONCACAF right now that's giving the U.S. any trouble. And so that's not really going to push your development. And so it goes to the point of, okay, well, if you're not going to play against meaningful opponents as a country, you want your players playing in Europe. You don't want them sitting on the bench. And so somebody like Christian Pulisic going to AC Milan and tearing it up in Serie A, and hopefully that continues. Gio Reyna goes to Nottingham Forest and sits on the bench. And yes, his agent, I believe, had a connection with Nottingham Forest. And so I guess it's just agent play and everything. But you hope with this 2-year cycle that these players start to look at their careers and say, look, it's not about the club that I go to, it's about the playing time. And that's something that the Philadelphia Union, Ernst Tenner and Jim Curtin, both focus on heavily. They look at the player development and not just a team that's going to give them the most money to tie this into MLS. And I think more teams, more players should look at that as well. And yes, we all know clubs love making money, but at the end of the day, it's like you want to see these players progressing.
I have a question for you guys. I'll start with you, Joe. Weston McKennie was rumored to come back to the MLS. Do you think that is something that will be accepted by Poch, and is something that we should get accustomed to seeing, players trying to come back to the MLS to play in the United States?
So obviously not being in his head, not knowing what he's thinking. My perspective is I feel that he strikes me as a manager who is okay. I'm using, like italicized okay with players playing in MLS. And here's the big if they're like a Landon Donovan leading their club, they are the guy. Because you want that, because what you're getting in that perspective, if you're the guy, is a mental development that you're not going to get sitting on the bench at the second division Sweden team, right? Like just because you're in Europe doesn't necessarily mean you're developing. But I think if you're going back to MLS to fight for minutes, to sit on the bench, to be rotating into, the third round of the Open Cup game or the group stage of the Leagues Cup, that I don't think that's a good move. And I think you should push to figure out where you're going to have the best options. And to Bob's point, to have the best options to be the guy in those competitions. Maybe it's a smaller club, but you're getting those minutes. So I would say, I think we're going to see some people called up in MLS, but it's only if it meets a certain criteria.
Bob, I saw you shaking your head.
No 24-year-old with who respects himself, who started 29 games for Juventus last year, should be looking at Major League Soccer in any scenario, period. You want him to be a pit bull, getting into one-on-ones, dealing around in the midfield. Got 7 assists last year. Juventus actually looked really good, but I think it's more telling on the US's reputation that he served admirably in the midfield, did nothing spectacularly, and they can't wait to ship him out. And it's been like this every single year with Juventus. If you can do that in one of the best teams in one of the best leagues, MLS should not be an option, should not even be an afterthought. You want to tell me that you want your national team midfielder facing Ben Bender as the best player he's going to go up with touches on that week? Absolutely unacceptable. He needs to go to, I agree. First of all, I just want him to stay in Juventus. I think he was very good there. But it is unfair that Americans are going to have to fight for every minute, be spectacular, be the best player on the field, and then still in some games have to worry about being traded for less.
Didn't he look poor in Leeds though when he was playing with Leeds?
Yes. Yeah. Everyone looked poor in Leeds that year. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Everybody did look poor. You 100%. You on the money, and that's why the Americans got blamed for that. Todd, how do you feel about MLS in general and Weston McKennie coming over here?
Yeah, I think somebody like Weston, 24, 25 years old, it's a head scratcher, right? It's like you're playing at a top club, and if it's surely trying to get more playing time, I'm sure there's clubs in Europe that would be willing to give him playing time, and maybe it's a money aspect. I mean, I'm sure if he would go to Cincinnati would pay him handsomely, and so maybe that played a factor. I mean, you would hope not. You would hope that these players are wanting to push themselves to push for minutes to get into the squad, not just for money. So yeah, when those rumors appeared, and I guess it appeared that it was pretty close. It was a little bit concerning because, like Bob said, I mean, Juventus is one of the Europeans' biggest clubs in the world, and yeah, I know they've had their troubles over the last couple of years and everything, but still, I mean, you're playing for a historic club. You're getting playing time, and you look like one of the best players in that Juventus team. And so, okay, if Juventus don't value you, then let's try to find a club that is going to value you in Europe. And so, going to Joe's point, I don't see it as an issue. If Pochettino decides to come to MLS and give guys tries, I think there are talented players in here still. I mean, again, just going back to Philadelphia Union, I mean, a player like Jack Glynn, Nate Harriel, they just got done with U23s at the Olympics, and now they're going to be moving on, hopefully soon, to the national team. John Tolkien with New York Red Bulls, I'm sure he's a player who's going to eventually wind up going to Europe. But still, I mean, there are some talented players that play in MLS still, in my opinion, and it's only a matter of time before they make that move to Europe. But for the time being, I mean, if they're still in MLS, I don't see why you wouldn't give them the call up if they're good enough.
And we have one guest that just jumped on, Mr. Daniel Solana. Solana, I'll ask the question. I don't know if you were listening or not. I'll ask the question that I was asking everybody else. What do you think about the rumors of Weston McKennie coming to the MLS? And do you think Pochettino would consider calling up players to the U.S. men's national team if they're playing for the MLS?
I mean, first of all, good evening, gentlemen. How's it going? I mean, I think you have to at least think that the answer there is yes, that he's going to call the best players. Doesn't matter where they play, or the players that are in the best form at that specific time, whether it be MLS, Liga MX players who are playing in South America, Europe. I don't think it should matter. You just need to bring the most informed players to play. And I think that's what you see from at least most of the teams in South America. You've seen teams from, and I compare the U.S. to the South American teams just because of the proximity. And a lot of South American teams use MLS players. For example, Peru is one of them. They have a number of players in MLS. Canada is another team who has a number of players that play in MLS. So I think the old argument that, if the player plays in MLS, he shouldn't be called, I think that's just old and boring, and you don't need to use that argument anymore. He just needs to put the best 22 guys on the roster and use those. And in terms of Weston McKennie, we've talked about it before on Battered Herons, in terms of him being a possible addition to Inter Miami if he becomes a free agent or something like that. And in terms of the league, I think it'd be great, because a player of his stature coming back and playing here, it'd be fantastic. But in terms of his personal career, I think it would be completely disastrous. I would prefer Weston McKennie to go play in Galatasaray or Fenerbahce or something like that, where he might see some better competition, even within practice and playing with his own teammates, than if he were on an MLS roster.
So you're suggesting that because he's already established, he shouldn't take a step back?
That's correct.
And right. Okay, I get you. Okay, so and that's basically, I think, what Bob and Joe also said, that maybe some MLS guys will find their way into the roster to fill in the back end. But if you are an established European player, you shouldn't be taking a step back to go play in the MLS. Does anybody else want to add anything about the Pochettino hire? Solana, what did you think about the Pochettino hire before we move on to a Leagues Cup?
I'm getting slammed, man. I'm getting slammed all over social media. I just posted.
Yeah, I saw. Yes, you're the one of the very few people that I saw write anything negative about the hire.
Well, and I think folks, especially folks that are fans of the U.S. men's national team, are excited because he's a coach who has coached at very big teams. Chelsea being one of them, obviously Tottenham, not as big as a team, and also PSG. He also coached at Southampton, but he's had a short coaching career. When you compare him to some of the other names that were mentioned, with the hires and stuff. But at the end of the day, USA went after 4 or 5 guys ahead of him, and they all turned down the job. And even one of the guys who was favored to get the job prior to Copa America and prior to Berhalter coming back, Jesse Marsch, even came out publicly and said he wouldn't take the job if it was offered to him. So I think that kind of put a negative, and U.S. men's national teams fans, maybe were a little distraught, a little upset at those comments. And obviously getting a name like Pochettino, it's a good name. But if you go back and you study, some of the teams that he's coached, I mean, when he coached PSG, he had fantastic players, and it's not like they played out of this world. They weren't completely dominating teams, and he had the players to do so. I agree, he overachieved at Tottenham with the roster he had, but I mean, I sent you the roster. He had some fantastic players that were in their prime. He had a very young Kane. He had a Lucas Moura, who was a very good player. He still had a son who was very young at the time. And even in their midfield, they had some pretty young studs who were representing their national team. He had Eddie Lamela coming off the bench. Yep.
But some of those guys dropped form once he left. I don't know if I'm a direct correlation, but Ali dropped, Winks dropped. Like, some of those players stopped playing as well once he left.
Absolutely. I mean, you can argue that. But, I mean, at the other 2 stops that he's had post-Tottenham, I mean, has he been an absolute failure? Possibly at Chelsea, yes. But, I mean, he wasn't given the greatest roster. But at PSG, I mean, just winning the league's trophy, League One, to me, it's not good enough, especially with the amount of money that went into building that roster and having Messi, Mbappe, and Neymar, and just coming up with league's trophies. That's just not good enough to me.
But I think that what we know from him becoming head coach of a team that had 3 of the best players in the world at that time and having all that money is that there's people who are a lot smarter than us, who make $1 billion decisions more than all of us. And if they trust him, then I trust him. The one thing I do like, Dan, that you did say on Twitter,
great point,
which I really like, is you mentioned someone like Jesse Marsch, someone who's actually American coaching the Americans men's team. And we all know no one has ever won the World Cup with a foreign club, like all those stats and all that. But with this U.S. men's national team, there are players like Yunus Musa whose connection to the U.S. are questionable at best. Like we're taking advantage of some dual national rules, and it's hard for me to think that there aren't some players who are just putting on a shirt. We just watched the Olympics and we saw people on the podium crying when their national anthem was playing. We see that each and every year. This isn't the U.S. men's national team of the early 90s where every player played for college ball in America who, these are players whose parents went on vacation once and got lucky and now their son has a American birth certificate. I do think that in the future, if we can find a great American coach who brings maybe a little more passion, who's a little more local, that would have been ideal. However, I'm still very happy.
And we can end it with this real quick, because I have heard some people say that they wish they would have been American. And I talked to Mike Longan from the Miami show. He tells me that he didn't want a foreign coach because no foreign coach had ever won the World Cup.
That's our goal.
My question is, my question is, why are you worried about winning a World Cup? Let's worry about getting out of the group stage, because we couldn't do it in Copa America. We got the World Cup coming up. Stop worrying about a foreigner winning the World Cup.
How about you worry first about playing some nice football on the pitch instead of that garbage that they played during the Copa America?
Let's take a step up in quality, and then we'll worry about a World Cup per se. But right now, let's just take a step up in quality, and that's what I'm hoping for. But all right, we'll end the Pochettino talk here. I think most of us are happy with the hire, and I think even Solana isn't as happy, but he thinks it was a good move, I would assume. Much better than what we had in Berhalter. So let's move over to Leagues Cup. And I'll start with my guy, Todd Lewis, because you are probably the happiest out of everybody, because your Philadelphia Union are somehow still in it. You beat Cincinnati, don't know how. How are you feeling about the Leagues Cup for the Philly and just in general? How do you think the Leagues Cups look so far? Because compared to last year, it doesn't seem to have the same buzz.
Yeah, so let's start with that, right? I mean, it's a little bit disappointing just when you look at the stadiums, and they're pretty bare. When the Union played in CF Montreal over the weekend, it was pretty dead in there. And then you watch around the league, watch other games, and it's more of the same. And tickets are going for dirt cheap, and it's not a good sign. I mean, it's disappointing from that sense, but I totally get it, right? I mean, season ticket holder myself, it's like I opted out of the Leagues Cup just because you want us to pay for season tickets, you want us to pay for Leagues Cup, and then if your team makes the playoffs, you got to pay for playoff tickets on top of that. So I understand why fans opted to opt out of Leagues Cup. But it is, I mean, you got to feel bad for the players. Alejandro Bedoya, Philadelphia Union captain, spoke after the Montreal game and said, yeah, he was disappointed, honestly, to see the Cruz Azul fans take over the river end, which is where the supporters sit for the Philadelphia Union, where the Sons of Ben sit. He was really disappointed that the Union fans really didn't show up for that game. And he said he understood why, but it's your home stadium. You still want them to show up. And, this Saturday against Metzalon, hopefully Union fans show up. This is Liga MX team that's fairly new. I think they established in 2020. Somebody in the comments can fact check me on that, or one of you guys on here can. But I don't expect there to be a ton of Mexican fans at the stadium like it was Cruz Azul fans. So hopefully fans show up for the Philadelphia Union, as they're in the quarterfinals, and then the winner of this plays Columbus Crew or New York City, whoever wins that game. And Union fans know how fierce of a rivalry it is between New York City. And so you hope New York City can take care of business against Columbus, but Columbus is one of the best teams in MLS too. And so, for me, the Union are in hot form right now, and I didn't want league play to stop because the Union had won 2 games against New England and Nashville, and I get it, 2 of the worst teams in MLS, but still, you got to win the games that you play in front of you. And so the Union had momentum coming into the Leagues Cup, and they continue to have momentum. 6 games unbeaten, and whatever happens in Leagues Cup now from here on out for the Union, it's 3 wins, and they could win a trophy. As things stand, they're 1 point behind Atlanta for the final playoff spot for the play-in game. And so there's no guarantee that the Union make playoffs. And I think for any team, that the goal should be playing in CONCACAF Champions Cup. And so if you're 3 wins away from winning a trophy that's going to qualify for CONCACAF Champions Cup, you got to go all in. The fans should be all in because at the end of the day, isn't that what fans want is trophies? The Union haven't won a trophy since 2020, winning the Supporter Shield, and you can put an asterisk next to it, whatever, because of the shortened season, because of COVID. So, the discussion between Union fans right now is, what if we win League's Cup and the Union don't qualify for playoffs? Is that a successful season? And I would argue it is, because you won a trophy, and this core that the Union have, they're not going to be around for much longer. There's reports that Jose Martinez is getting sold to Corinthians in Serie A in Brazil. And so there's another piece to the core going. Julian Kranza was sold this summer to Feyenoord over in the Netherlands. And so slowly but surely, the Union are starting to sell off pieces to that core of that team that's been together since 2019, 2020. And so they only have one trophy to show for it. So, of course, yeah, you want to go all in for League's Cup. The players want to go in, and the fans should get on board too. And so
the Sons of Ben, are they showing up?
No, they're not. They are not. They did not show up for the Cruz Azul game. They did not show up for the CF Montreal game. And who knows what's going to happen this weekend. I saw some people that were saying on social media, which I think we can all agree here, social media isn't the whole representation of everybody's fan base. It's just a small minority, but they tend to be the most vocal. But right. And the Sons of Ben, some of them have said, you know what, because we got this far, we're going to be back. We're going to come back to the stadium. So we'll see if the club as a whole, the supporters group as a whole, comes out with a statement like St. Louis did, I think, a couple of weeks ago, and said they're ending their protest for the League's Cup. Let's see if the Sons of Ben do something like that. I mean, look, you're three games away.
What I team people would do if their team made it far.
For sure. Like why wouldn't you? And I talked to people prior to this run that the Union were on. They're like, yeah, if they make it to the semifinals or the final, yeah, we're gonna go. Yeah, why wouldn't you? And like I said at the beginning, it makes sense to me why fans opted out, because you want them to pay for season tickets, play for a League's Cup, and then you got to pay for playoff tickets. So I understand fans picking and choosing what they're going to pay for, what they're not. But yeah, I mean, the Union, fine form right now. Ty Baribo, their Israeli striker who took over for Julian Kranza, can't stop scoring. Back-to-back braces, and the Union are going to continue to ride that hot hand. And FC Cincinnati players after the game said, yeah, they're going to circle the meeting against Philadelphia Union at the end of the season. These two teams will meet again, and they won't forget getting blown out by the Union 4-2.
Joe, I know you enjoyed last year's League's Cup run for Dallas. And especially that first Messi road game. How are you feeling about the League's Cup this year?
And we'll always have last year, right? That's the takeaway here. I tell you what, I was fortunate enough to be in Paris for the Olympics, and I was at the I was able to go to the wildness of the Morocco and Argentina opening soccer game in Saint Etienne, which was incredible. Happy to talk about that. And was seeing Dallas get destroyed in the League's Cup, and went, well, okay, I guess that trophy's gone. So it's been very frustrating. I was surprised, though, to see the total depletion of the fan bases in a lot of these stadiums. Very disappointing to see, but it reminded me, this is a bit of a callback, I don't know if people will remember, the Superliga from 2007 to 2010 between Liga MX and MLS clubs. If anybody remembers that, it was an 8-team tournament. Only 8-team tournament. And it was because MLS and Liga MX wanted CONCACAF to up their game with what became the Champions League and is now the Champions Cup again. And so they devised this interleague tournament. First year, really exciting. Never seen something like this before. And they said it was going to be the 4 best teams. And then the 4 best teams decided they didn't want to do it. So they had the 4 next best teams who did it. And then they didn't want to do it. And then it just became whoever was available. And then people stopped coming and said, this is a waste of time. I don't want to do this. It's glorified friendly. And they eventually scrapped it after 4 years. So I'm worried that League's Cup is going to eventually go the way of Superliga, except that I feel like Don Garber has learned some lessons from that and said, let's make it more exciting. Let's get everybody in there. Let's do shootouts. Let's do all these different things. Let's make sure we can win. We, meaning MLS, let's throw extra prize money in. Let's give us a Champions Cup spot. So I think there's a potential here, but yeah, I've been very impressed with Todd's Philadelphia Union and the run that they've been going on, and they look sharp. I just would like more people to come out and support.
That would be nice. And I have a question, and I'll ask Bob before I get your opinion on League's Cup in general. Do you think it's just the American fan base that we're not big fans of in-season tournaments? because we're not accustomed to it.
Yes, that is what it is. You win. That is the prize. I was a big apologist for Leagues Cup at the beginning because it brought in money, and growing teams need money. I don't like it more than tradition like the US Open Cup, but I do acknowledge that it made more money than the US Open Cup. It was more attractive to a lot of people, and last year it was pretty cool. This year, I knew it was going to be terrible. Actually, had my honeymoon. I was in the Dominican Republic. I couldn't watch the games if I wanted to, and I didn't.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And yeah, that's just it. There's at least the Open Cup is empty stadiums, but there's a history. Here, there's empty stadiums and there's no history. I'm not excited for it. I really don't care. I'm tuning in a little bit, but I know even now teams aren't taking it all that seriously. Todd, I'm not going to let you get away with saying that Philadelphia has a chance to win a trophy this year, because they do not. That path is not opening for them. The next 3 games, I hope they do go through just to see them get torn apart in the final. I don't think there's any shot there. So if I'm going to pump the brakes on calling the U.S. men's national team final as a team, then I have to pump the brakes on Philadelphia winning any trophy anytime soon. Yeah, that's just it. Like, look, we talked about the culture of the U.S. men's national team. Let the 16-year-old kids play at the U.S. Open Cup, and then you have a funny story later on when you're playing the Olympic squad, when you're playing in a World Cup together. Hey, remember that one time Louisville played against Nashville in the first round of the U.S. Open Cup? Then at least you have some tradition, and at least you have a little bit of culture behind it. Leagues Cup is not tradition, it is not culture, and without the money, it's not useful.
I like, and you know what? It's funny because the reason we started doing this show is because I wanted to get perspectives from all over the league. Last week, we were heavy on the West Coast. We had somebody from San Jose, from LA, and from Portland. And the 3 of them let us know that on the West Coast, the Leagues Cup is buzzing. People are interested. And obviously, it's because they have such a high population of Mexican Americans or Mexicans in general. And Liga MX is popular over there. So it's buzzing over there, and it is popular. And a lot of people are excited about it. And I think on the East Coast, we're not. But I mean, it is exciting over there, apparently. So I think the Open Cup isn't exciting anywhere. So I guess that's what the Leagues Cup has over the Open Cup, is that at least it has the West Coast and the Liga MX fans, because that does bring money, like you said. Because, I mean, Liga MX fans, they don't get to see their teams very often, and this is the opportunity.
But then let the clubs decide which tournament they want to take more seriously. Right, like Philadelphia, they're going nowhere. If you want to throw it all out there and put a run together, do it. You did it. You beat Cincinnati. That was a fantastic match. You have a good chance. I think you're actually favorites in this match. Then you're going to face Columbus and either America or LAFC. Not looking great there. Bracket. But there's always teams, like look at, for example, clubs that maybe don't have a chance to win Supporter Shield or go far in the playoffs, but they can put something together. And this is really the point you try to get to. If you can get to the final 8 squads, then now you have a chance at winning some silverware and packing the stadium. But if it's not going to happen for this, it's not going to happen anywhere. Like I said, I've been an apologist for Leagues Cup. I was so happy to see it come back. But these MLS needs to take a step back and let the clubs have autonomy on what competitions they're going to take seriously and which ones they're going to put on the back burner, just like every other country.
Go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to jump in. I wanted to say 2 things. One, I got to go back to a second when Bob. So I'm a Open Cup fan. Obviously, I'm a Dallas fan, but I want to point out the fact that Bob was talking about there's empty stadiums, but there's tradition. And I immediately went, there's tradition of empty stadiums. Yeah, I guess that makes sense with the Open Cup. Sorry. I love the Open Cup, but I had to just it was right there. It was a softball. I had to hit it. The other thing about Leagues Cup that I cannot shake off, last year, it was the Messi effect. I don't care what anybody said. Everybody wanted to know, are you going to get to host the first Messi game? Dallas was packed like I've never seen it before. And I've been going to games for 26 years in Dallas. It's never been that packed. You've got the Cowboys, you got the Rangers, you've got so many other things competing for attention. That stadium was overfull. So people wanted that. And I think we were all excited for what story could we get out of the Leagues Cup this year? And the story is empty stadiums. And the story is not a lot going on. Right. And I think, Danny, I know you mentioned this on one of the last episodes. if MLS can really go all in on expanding the rosters, not some weird roster mechanisms of transferring players from your MLS Next Pro team, no. Expand the rosters, expand the salary cap, allow people to stock their teams however they want. Then if they want to do Open Cup and Leagues Cup, that's fine. And then they can choose which is a development pipeline, which is a trophy they want to chase, and which they just want to phone it in and see what happens, right? It depends. But I don't think the Leagues Cup is going anywhere for at least probably 5 totally, at least until after the World Cup is my thought.
Yeah.
But I'm curious.
Well, that year they can't play it.
Or right, they're putting it on pause that year, right?
Yeah. At least that's my understanding. They're gonna put the MLS on pause for the World Cup.
Yeah, that's right.
So they can't pause it for 2 months. So I would assume there's no Leagues Cup that year. And one quick suggestion, see what you guys think. They said that they didn't like the fact that Open Cup games were played in the middle of the week, and then you had Champions Cup also, so it was too congested. I suggest that teams that qualify for the Champions Cup play in the Champions Cup, and everybody else just enters the Open Cup. You don't have any team that's playing Champions Cup and Open Cup, and then everybody's happy because it doesn't interfere with Leagues Cup. Leagues Cup has its own month. I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't do it that way.
I think Leagues Cup and Open Cup are competitors because there are so many more games played. But in the Champions Cup, your maximum is what, 3 extra games? Like, is that Champions enough to uproot the whole thing for?
The Champions Cup, it's 2 legs. So if you make it, like for example, Columbus played how many extra games? They played 7 extra games, or it's 3 rounds of 2 legs plus the final. So it's 7 extra games. I mean, Open Cup is single elimination. So yeah, I Champions Cup might even be more. But you have to make a long run. In Open Cup, you're more likely to make that run because you're playing against lower teams, I guess. I don't know. It's just I'm just thinking of how to make everybody happy because I think that they should be in everything. If I had to pick one over the other, though, I would pick Leagues Cup.
I think the problem with the proposed idea of if you get Champions Cup, you don't go into Open Cup is then you miss a easier opportunity to get back in the Champions Cup. And the idea, right, is that you want to be in the Champions Cup year over year. So the Open Cup is the easiest path to get in.
Right.
So I think there is an opportunity to do something almost like you see, like Champions League based on finish, Europa League, right? Like the conference, right? I think there's a mechanism somewhere where you could make everybody happy, but I don't know that MLS and Liga MX want to make everybody happy. So you never know.
Is there any other team in Leagues Cup right now that surprised you? Colorado, for me. Anybody else surprised by any of these teams?
Metzalon.
Oh,
just like we had Querétaro last season, and they went on a hot run, and they were one of the worst teams in Liga MX. Same with Metzalon. And so, I mean, to see them upset Cruz Azul, who I know were down a man, and that was a tough game for the Philadelphia Union. They get a late equalizer with Daniel Gazdag, but Cruz Azul were all over the Union in that game, and eventually lost the penalty kicks. And then we see Cruz Azul have 3 of the penalties saved against Metzalon. So I think they've got to be one of the teams that's the biggest shock for me. Colorado, yeah, I mean, I respect that too, but you look what they did in the offseason, just bringing in Mihailovic, Zach Steffen. Yes, I know the hiring of, I'm forgetting the head coach's name. Somebody help me out.
Chris Armas.
Thank you. Yes. Former New York Red Bull head coach. So, I mean, he brought in MLS guys. And so the question was, what's he going to do with Colorado? And I think you bring in players with experience in MLS. You bring in a coach who has MLS experience. And it's all went to plan for Colorado, I think, this season. So, I mean, I can see why you say Colorado is a little bit of a surprise that they're this far in the tournament. But they brought in a lot of guys who have MLS experience. And I think the teams that do well in MLS are teams that have a lot of MLS veterans on the rosters.
Bob, I mean, Colorado beat 2 Mexican teams along the way, and now this is their 3rd. I think they might be the only team that had to play a Mexican team every round. Bob, how do you feel about maybe the biggest surprise?
Well, they're not the biggest surprise for me. I think that they're good. And the thing with Chris Armas, being a higher press coming from the Red Bull system is that's a team that's built to hang around in a lot of games. That doesn't mean they're going to win a lot of games. That doesn't mean they're going to win every championship that they get. It just means that when they're on the road, they're going to be competitive. It's the same thing that Red Bulls are on right now. They're a very unspectacular team, but you never quite feel comfortable playing against them. So I think that's where Colorado is for me. For me, the team that's a surprise is really the Seattle Sounders. And if I'm a Seattle Sounders fan, I don't want them going on a deep run right here, because this team made a change. They brought in who's the young guy? De La Vega, who's like their only youth player. Everyone else is getting another year older. Jordan Morris, Raul Ruidiaz, the Roldan brothers. Jordan Morris. He's the only thing that they have going on for them as far as youth. So I kind of wanted Seattle to get out right away. They started so bad in Major League Soccer. They've turned it around, had a really, really hot stretch. Okay, now guys, go back on oxygen. Jordan Morris, take out your oxygen tank, sit down, get Raul Ruidiaz some fresh legs, and prepare for the Major League Soccer, the tournament we actually care about. I did not see a team that old and going that far, and I didn't think that it would have been an ambition to win Leagues Cup this year.
Man, I am so over Seattle. I'm sorry. That is the one team that I cannot say. Dallas and Seattle, I've lost count of how many times we've played and lost in the playoffs to Seattle. I am over Seattle, but I will say, to Bob's point, they did start slow. They did turn up the heat, but come on, y'all. This is the story of Seattle. This is what they do. They start slow, sometimes slower than others. They get about halfway, and then Brian Schmetzer says, hey, we're gonna notch it up a bit. Here we go. Now we're driving, because, and Bob also pointed out, their intention is to ramp right up into the playoffs, make a deep run, win MLS Cup. That is their blueprint of success for the Sounders. And it is a little surprising that they decided to also do that for Leagues Cup. But it makes me feel like Brian Schmetzer might think, we may not have the legs to actually go in MLS Cup playoffs this year. But with the way Leagues Cup is designed, you got 90 minutes and PKs. I think he feels that rolling the dice a bit on this is a little bit more beneficial to get in that Champions Cup. So this signals to me, which is a surprise, that I think he's going to pull up a bit when it comes to the playoff run to double down on Leagues Cup. And I wouldn't be surprised if they end up winning the whole thing.
I agree there. And it's so they're also built for this. The Seattle Sounders team isn't built for the Western Conference because they're a defensive powerhouse. They are so defensive on the ball, and all their problems are with scoring, giving up 29 goals in 25 matches. And the hardest thing in Major League Soccer to do is have an elite defense. The easiest thing in Major League Soccer to do is turn your season around when you have an elite defense, and you just need to figure the scoring aspect out. When the spine is good, we see that with Charlotte. We see that with the New York Red Bulls. We see that with, I don't really want to say Columbus Crew because they're so packed all over the field. But, this defense is so good that they're not built for the Western Conference. They're going to have harder times with LA Galaxy, LAFC teams that want to score 6 times a match and don't really care about conceding 3 or 4. But in this format where they just need to win, and it doesn't matter how many goals they score during the tournament, put a W on the score sheet and you move on. I think that, to speak to his point there is really what the team is built for.
I agree. What I felt like there was a lot of upsets on the East Coast. What do you think was the bigger upset? NYCFC over Tigres or Philadelphia over Cincinnati? Todd.
I was going to say, I'll go. Definitely not the Union versus Cincinnati. I mean, I think people look at that game and say, yeah, it's an upset, but Cincinnati were missing a lot of players in that game, especially defensively. So, yeah,
they're going to be like that the rest of the year.
Maybe. That's not a huge upset to me. I don't know if I would call like Tigres New York City an upset either. Man, it's a good question. I don't think either one of those teams.
No,
what about for you? I was going to say.
What about Seattle over Pumas 4-0? That was wild.
That is wild. What about Inter Miami
giving up 3 goals in 25 minutes?
That was a bit of a surprise.
Right? You know what? I think that was the biggest surprise for me was Miami being up 2-0 with 25 minutes to go and losing 3-2.
And no changes by Tata.
And no changes until the 84th minute. So, yeah, I think that was a pretty big surprise for me. Bob, what was the biggest surprise for you in the last round?
I mean, like I said, I was in the Dominican Republic with no Wi-Fi during the last round.
That's right.
So, I'm going to let these guys talk.
All right. Joe.
Well, I think we can all agree the biggest surprise was that Dallas didn't get in the knockout rounds. No, is that just me? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I think for me, the biggest surprise, I actually was, I want to echo something that Todd mentioned was the fact that I'm not going to pronounce it well, right? But the team that Philadelphia is playing, their win over Cruz Azul was really surprising to me, and I was excited to see a Liga MX team that I am not familiar with show up in the quarterfinals. To me, I don't like the Open Cup versus Leagues Cup debate. I think you can figure out a way to make people happy in different ways. But the thing that I like about the Open Cup is when I don't know about a team and I start knowing about them because of how they do in a tournament. I think that's what we're getting in Leagues Cup. So if we're thinking about the story beyond attendance, I think this could be the story is if, can somebody help me out with the pronunciation?
Masaltan?
Yes, thank you. If they're able to, for Todd's sake, I don't want them to beat the Union, but if they do, and then they get to the semifinals or even get to the finals, that would be a really interesting story for this edition of Leagues Cup.
Do you think that this has any bearing on the argument what's better, MLS over Liga MX?
No, I mean, we talked about it last time I was on the show. It's a joke. I mean, if these games were played down in Mexico, we wouldn't see majority MLS teams still in the tournament. I mean, it's
you don't
fact,
think so?
In my opinion.
You don't think it would be half-half?
No, I mean, look what happens in Champions Cup. I mean, maybe some of the lesser MLS Liga MX teams, yeah, sure, maybe MLS teams are going to get results, but your Tigres, your Monterrey, your Cruz Azul, your Club Americas, absolutely not. All of them would still be in the final 8, in my opinion, right now.
I think that what happens in Champions Cup to us is one of the factors why Liga MX doesn't do well in Leagues Cup, and it's because they're playing at the beginning of their season. When we start Champions Cup, like Nashville, for example, their first round in Champions Cup was basically preseason games. It was before the regular season started. Like, we have to take a while to get going while Liga MX is already in play. When we start Leagues Cup, obviously they don't play at home, so that's another factor. But they're just like 3 games into their season, and that's why I heard one of the Liga MX people that was on the show a couple of weeks ago was telling us that it's at the beginning of their season. Like, well, we go through the same thing for Champions Cup. So I think that also plays a factor in the Champions Cup, especially when you have new players, new coaches, and you're literally playing either in the preseason or a game or 2 into the season. Because, for example, when Inter Miami played against it was Nashville. When they played against Nashville, the first game of the Champions Cup, it was literally after the second game of the season. So I think that both leagues are at a disadvantage because of the schedule of their seasons.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a little bit of excuses, and I think it really has to be a team-by-team basis. Some of these Mexican teams, they don't have a huge off-season like we do in the America because they have the 2 season, what is it, the Apertura, Clausura.
And the Clausura, huh?
Some teams have played together for a long time, and they're fresh, and that's good. Some Major League Soccer teams are worn out. They're tired. They're injured now. Others are rolling. Philadelphia. So I think it's a team by team basis. I think it's not great analysis just to say, oh well, it's before the season starts. Well, a lot of these players, have played in the Euros or in the Olympics or here that I'm not here for it. Let's take it. It is what it is. It's nothing more. It's nothing less. I don't want to have to guess. We don't need to compete on everything,
For sure, even though they want to. And real quick, the pronunciation Mazatlan was given to us by David Day. And
Thanks,
Todd
David.
Lewis, you were correct. They did come into existence in 2020. So a month before the pandemic.
What a great time to start a team.
Yeah. No kidding.
Inter Miami, baby. They started in 2020.
There we go. So Messi is going to go to Mazatlan next. Is that
after this? Yes, that's the next stop. That's the next stop. You'd be surprised. I didn't realize that Mexicans didn't like Messi as much as they don't. It's something new that I've learned recently. All right, transfer news or lack thereof. What did you guys think of the transfer window? Because everybody was hyping it up. Ooh, this transfer window is going to be crazy. Last week, ooh, the next week's going to be crazy. I mean, there were some moves here and there, but I mean, outside of maybe Giroud, there wasn't any huge names coming over. A couple teams lost some pieces that I think could be crucial to their success, like Aiden Morris leaving Columbus. I think that there was a couple moves here and there that could affect some teams positively and negatively. What did you guys think of the transfer window? Todd, I'll start with you. Todd, what did you think of the transfer window?
I think, it was pretty hectic there the last 24, 48 hours for Charlotte fans with them being linked with so many players. And
that's why I was wanting Danny Brams on the show. I was really curious what he would tell me because they were very ambitious.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, trying to go out for Miguel Almiron and it supposedly being close, but then Newcastle and Charlotte couldn't come to an agreement on a fee for Almiron. And I was seeing Atlanta fans saying, I'm canceling my season tickets if Almiron goes to Charlotte. This is it. This is the final straw and the nail in the coffin. Man, I would love to see that because I don't know how you guys feel, but I think Atlanta have the worst fan base in MLS. They come into MLS
really
hot. Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. They get spoiled with a hot season, then they win it. I don't. People in the comments, I think, would agree with me too. Atlanta come in and win MLS Cup, their second season in the league, and then ever since then, it's all been downhill from there. They got completely spoiled, and it's like, let's relax. Like, you have one of the richest owners in MLS. You guys have been blessed with star players, and yeah, things haven't worked out. Maybe it's been because of the coaching. Maybe it's because a whole bunch of different reasonings. Who knows? But no, their fan base cannot handle losing. And it's like, you guys are the most insufferable fans in the league with you guys just constantly being negative, finding reasons, not blaming your team for the reasons you lose, but, it's because the other team did this. It's the other team that did that. Nah, Atlanta fans are the worst in the league. But the transfer window as a whole, I think it was fine. I
was not expecting Atlanta to take random shots.
That's a nice hot take.
Yeah, okay, catching straight. I like it, Todd. Keep going. I'm sorry.
It's all good. I mean, I already know what's going to be the soundbite, and then I'll get added by Atlanta fans. So I mean, this should be fun. And then they bring up Sergio Santos diving. I mean, they're still stuck on the Union beating them in Champions League a couple seasons ago, and yeah, I mean, I don't know what's up with Atlanta fans, but yeah, it's great just watching them melt down, and we can continue to go. I mean, thanks for egging me on, Danny. So I absolutely hate their fan base, but it's a beautiful stadium. Love Mercedes-Benz. I mean, I'll give them that compliment.
That's like saying they got a great personality, right? That's like, well,
they do have very cheap concessions, though.
Yeah, exactly. That's the main thing, right? Love the concessions, but no, the transfer window as a whole, I think it was. I think it was fine. I look at a team like Columbus Crew. I think they, in my opinion, probably won it. People might say LAFC because you bring in Drew, and that's a huge name. But I look at somebody like AZ Jackson from St. Louis coming over, DeJuan Jones from New England Revolution, Andres Herrera from River Plate. You have Dylan Chambers, who should replace Aiden Morris. They were very, very active, and for the time being, Cucho's still there, and so. I think, yes, Aiden Morris is a huge loss, but they continue to find ways to win. And Wilfred Nance is one of the best coaches in MLS, if not the best coach. And so I think Columbus will be fine with losing Aiden Morris. Like I said, I mean, LAFC bringing in Drew, that's a pretty big name. You have LA Galaxy bringing in Marco Royce. Not sure what he has left at this point. I think maybe that's more of a name, and hopefully, I guess for Galaxy fans, that's not a Steven Gerrard situation. Hopefully it's more like a Zlatan hits the ground running for the club. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think overall I'm pretty satisfied, and I don't think MLS needs to attract these big name players like they once did. You continue to get younger, you continue to find these hidden gems. I think that's what MLS should really focus on. Got me worked up on Atlanta. I'm still mad at Atlanta.
Bob, what do you think about the transfer window? Any big transfers? You excited that Shaqiri's finally gone because he was quite the bust?
Yeah, so it actually, I thought the writing was on the wall for most of these plays. We kind of knew a lot of teams, what they were going to do, what their goals were. I was a little disappointed in Atlanta, making $15 million, spending $5 million. Addressing one of their missing positions and not the others. And, with everything else, we knew Marco Royce. I know that was a surprise, but anyone who follows the rumors knew that rumor was kicking since the beginning of the season. So that's one I was thoroughly expecting to go through. Giroux, this is something that we've known about for quite a long time. The things that surprised me were like Austin FC getting 3 new players, and then St. Louis making, I think, 6 incoming transfers. I mean, I expected this to be like a European window where every team was going out, making significant moves. And what we got was more like a baseball trade deadline where the contenders went and got another piece or added depth. and everyone else just kind of shuffled the deck. Again, St. Louis, Austin, two teams that kind of surprised me. I didn't think they were going to go as hard as they did. RSL made some moves, but the only club that I think really went from being a good team to a contender is Charlotte. And it's because that defense is elite. 27 goals allowed in 25 matches. That's lowest in the league, if not for the Columbus Crew. This team is very, very good. And the 30 goals they scored is the same number that the Chicago Fire scored. And they're in 6th place. So this is a good, elite defensive squad who needed the offensive pieces. And I think they did it. Karl Swiderski coming back. And while we see him, I remember him being a bust. But when I went back and look at his numbers, 12 goals in each of his 10 goals, 4 assists, and 12 goals, 4 assists. He had 2 pretty good seasons. I mean, that's the time where we expected a DP to score 25 goals. So I think maybe our expectations were too high at that time for him with Charlotte. But I think that that's exactly what they need. They bring in Tim Ream at center back. I think that is not only to bring out the best of that defense, it's a depth piece. It's going to help Dean Smith organize the back line, which has also still been fantastic. And then they bring in Pep Biel, who's a small left-footed attacker from Olympiacos. 11 goals, 6 assists in Copenhagen, 9 goals for Olympiacos, 2 assists in the 2022-2023 season. I mean, this is going to be the creative 10 that they did not have. Diarra was playing at the 10 position, and that's really not where he's best used for. So that is the team who got the best. They got an attacker, they got a number 10, and they've already had the best defense in the league. So they don't need to take a huge step forward to win a trophy this year. And I think that that's exactly what they are focused on doing now.
When you think about MLS and elite defenses, and off the top of my head, I can't think of any, so I'm going to refer to you and Joe and Todd, maybe you guys. What was the last elite defense that won a championship? And I don't mean that like facetiously or trying to be smart. I think I legit I can't remember the last elite defense that needed help offensively and kind of just defended their way to a chip. I off the top of my head, at least I can't think of one.
The Columbus Crew
last year, you mean? I don't know.
I mean, I guess we can go that way
with Cucho up top and Rossi. I mean, they had players that could give you those moments, though. I don't know if Charlotte has that.
I agree with that wholeheartedly, but with the asterisk saying there are system teams and there are teams that rely on stars in Major League Soccer, right? And there's been a lot of system teams who could put it together, right? Cincinnati, they're a system team. Red Bulls are a system team. This year, you know, there's other ones. If you want to go, RSL is kind of a system team. I know they have some stars. Colorado's a system team. Charlotte was a system team who was in 6th place playing fantastic ball with no one on that roster. It was just void of any talent. And now they're not, you know? So I think that they are closer to the Columbus Crew than to the New York Red Bulls today.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be Sporting Kansas City in 2013. They gave up 30 goals and won MLS Cup that year. I mean, they were fantastic defensively. And that off the top of my head, that's the team that comes to mind.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone other than Sporting KC from 2013. Looking at the list of them, the rest of them had somebody up top that was really driving the offense in order to get them over the hump.
And I'm not saying Charlotte can't do it. It's just a question that popped in my head because I do agree. And adding Tim Ream to solidify that defense, I think it's a great move. But I question in a tough spot, do you have that person that can get you that moment?
These Seattle Sounders are there every year. FC Cincinnati was that team last year, only allowing 39 goals through the course of the season. So yeah, it's a mix, and it, you know, that's the thing that makes MLS great. Like, there's so many ways to skin a cat. You can go,
and that's why I love it.
You can go superstars, and we'll see. I don't think they're there yet, but I think that they should be included in the conversation now.
Do you think they can finich top 4?
Yes.
Charlotte Soccer Show, Charlotte Soccer Show, I don't know if that's Danny Brands. He was supposed to join us on here. Wasn't able to make it.
I want to say,
what do you think?
I was just going to jump.
Now they can jump Red Bull and New York City FC and not even bat an eye in 4th position. So, yes.
Yeah, I think so too. They're great defensively. I don't have to say anything other than what Bob said. I mean, they're a fantastic team defensively.
I think it comes down with MLS. If you've got a top tier goalkeeper and one really solid defender, you can patchwork a little bit as long as your core, those two, maybe a third, is tight. And with Kalina and net, I don't know if that's the best pronunciation for his name.
Yeah, it is.
But he's okay. Thank you. He's a top tier goalie, and so I like the move with Reem. I worry about the move for Reem and some old legs, speaking as the fact that we are the same age and my legs don't do well on turf. Obviously, we're clearly the same. But also it doesn't seem to be a problem for everyone. So I like the move, but we'll see.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we talked about it earlier in the show. It's like the spine of the team is the most important. So you have Kalina, you have Melandri, you have Privet, who I hope doesn't lose his starting spot because as a Maryland native, just like himself, love seeing Maryland guys get the opportunity. And then the number 6, Ashley Westwood, it starts with the spine of the team. If you have that center of the field taken care of, everything else is going to work itself out. And it seems exactly what Charlotte have been good at this season.
And Charlotte's hardest games are behind them. If you look at ahead, they host Red Bulls, host Atlanta, then they play Montreal, Orlando, New England. They do play Miami, Chicago, Montreal, DC. With the exception of Miami and probably Orlando, those not only could all be wins, they could all be clean sheets.
No, I agree, and Danny brought it up here, and all good, Danny. Don't have to apologize. I know things pop up. He said there's a favorable schedule coming up. I don't know, when I look at the top 6 right now, right? Because right now it's Inter Miami, Cincinnati, Columbus, Red Bulls, NYCFC, and Charlotte, with Orlando right behind them in 7th. The team that outside of the top 3, I think the Red Bulls are the team that I would be most worried about as an Inter Miami fan. I think the Red Bulls would be the team that worries me the most. I think I worry about them more than NYCFC, Charlotte, Orlando, or anybody under them. The Red Bulls are the team that worry me. That high press. They also have a good defense. I don't know. I would worry about the Red Bulls before I worry about Charlotte. Not taking away anything from Charlotte, but that's who I would worry about.
Elite defense. If Charlotte isn't the best defense in the East, it is the Red Bulls, but they're just so unpredictable. No one wants to play Red Bull in the playoffs on the road because they bring it
Absolutely
to you. They might just give you a fat lip in like the first 10 minutes and, ride it from there. But as far as a season long, I don't think that they're going to have the juice to keep up with anyone else that we mentioned.
Yeah. All right. So go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, we had a lot of great Eastern Conference talk, Western Conference. I'm just going to be real selfish and talk about Dallas. And I think you're going to be really surprised coming out of the Leagues Cup break. All right. We had an opportunity to rest up. We signed Ruan from Montreal, which addressed a need we had at right back, which is a little scary for me because it makes me think that Giovanni Jesus is not as fit as originally thought. But I like the move. Alan Velasco is near full fitness, same with Jesus Ferreira. And Peter Musa has been lights out, fantastic, ever since Peter Lucen took over. And I think right now Dallas is going to make a push for the playoffs. And I'm excited. The downside is Boca Juniors keeps sniffing around Alan Velasco, even though he's injured, and they gave a $3 million bid. The Dallas said, get out of here. That's not enough. Apparently they came back with a $7 million bid, which matches what Dallas spent before. So I don't like it. I think he and Musa would be really dangerous up top. We all know Martin Paz can, save the world randomly. He'll just pull something out of his hat. So I think if we talk about elite goalies, if we have Martin Paz and our defense shores up, and then we get Musa and Velasco and Ferreira firing on all cylinders, I think we would make a run to the Western semis. I think that's about as much juice as we got in us, probably not more. And if we don't make the playoffs, then we're going to be looking for a new head coach, which sucks because I think our interim coach, Lucen, who's been with the team for a long time, has really turned a lot of guys around in a way that, bringing it back around to Poch at the beginning of the conversation, I think that's what Poch is going to be able to do for the U.S. team because of the fact that there's a lot of guys that were hungry and eager, but maybe a little confused by the system or lack thereof that previously existed. One with Nico Estevez at Dallas, and then we're talking about Greg Berhalter, which same coaching system, by the way. And then you get a guy coming in with this amount of talent that motivates and simplifies what the plan is and maximizes the talent. I think you're going to be surprised by Dallas, and I hope to be surprised by the U.S. men's national team.
And I hope for you, Dallas, also, because it's been a long season. But Todd, if you had to say, I know Bob said it was Charlotte. I can't remember. Did you tell me who you thought the biggest
Columbus.
move was? Columbus. That's right. You said that they added everybody, even though they lost Aiden Morris. And Joe, who do you think was what was the biggest move?
I mean, I think the biggest move was, it's so cliche, but Olivier Giroud to LAFC. I'm excited to see how that pans out. Also, Dallas signed a guy whose nickname is Show, so it's showtime, folks. I just had to get that in there. No, but really,
I like it.
Olivier Giroud to LAFC for me.
You know what the biggest move was the non-moves by Inter Miami for me, because they are lacking in that back line. That's something that could cost them, because Inter Miami is basically MLS Cup or bust. And the fact that they didn't add to the center back depth and the starters that they have are injury prone, I think that was the biggest thing for me, was the lack of movement by Inter Miami. And I think that could come around to bite them in the ass. But we shall see. All right. So let's wrap it up real quick. I forgot to get you through this. So just real quick, if you had to predict who's going to take the League's Cup, who do you think, Bob?
It's going to be LAFC Columbus in a preview of MLS Cup.
Okay. Ooh, okay. All right. I like that. Joe, I like that, not because I like the teams, but I like that you threw the MLS Cup also in there. I like it. Joe?
I think it's going to be Seattle against Philly, and I think Seattle's going to end up taking it.
Nice. Okay. Todd?
I think it's going to be Club America versus Columbus, and I have America taking it.
Nice. And I have Club America in the final also, and I would say against Columbus also. And I hope Club America wins. I know everybody's like, you should root for MLS. I want a Mexican team. If my team can't win, I want a Mexican team to win. I don't want any other MLS team celebrating. I'm sorry. I'm selfish. I apologize. But that's what I think. All right. I appreciate you guys taking the time to join us here and talking MLS all over. Please, let's start with Todd. Let everybody know where they could find you if they want to hear some of Todd the God talk Philadelphia and just football in general.
Well, we know the Atlanta fans definitely don't, but if they do, it's a God's Life on Twitter, the YouTube account at Free Kick Pod. You can find the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, also at Free Kick Pod. Wherever you get your podcast, the Free Kick. And once MLS starts back up, I'll start making my goals breakdown videos, whether it be goals that the Union score, concede, once MLS play resumes. And then you can find my writing at thefreekick.substack.com. And Danny, thanks for inviting me on for a second time, and hope to be on for a third in the future.
Yeah, man, it's fun, and I love you when you get on your rants. It's always fun.
Yeah, you went on a rant. You had to do it.
You ranted against Cincinnati last time, Atlanta this time. I'm kind of scared to see who's the next victim next time. Joe, let everybody know where they can find you at, man.
Yeah, so on Twitter, I'm at DTalksJoe, DTALKS Joe, but on Instagram, I'm at Humans United FC. Humans United FC is the name of the podcast. Season 1 covered the 25 for 25 of the Miami Fusion. Season 2, we are highlighting stories in soccer or football that you might have missed that are worthy of being elevated, so that way you can learn more about these individuals or teams or histories or whatever. I really enjoy it. What I'm really excited about, that I just recently posted on social media, because apparently I just can't get away from the Miami Fusion, unlike MLS. I have gone back through, or am in the process of going back through, all of the episodes I did, and I'm adding some new material and I'm recutting it, so that way the story of the Miami Fusion is told chronologically through the episodes. I had a lot of feedback where people were like, this is awesome, but I'd love to know where does it start? Whose perspective is it? I like how the episodes are all in an individual's chronological order, but I'd love for the whole story to be recut. So I said, you know what? I can do that. So I'm in the middle. I'm almost done putting the pieces together for the first episode. And then I'm not sure, hopefully in a few weeks it'll be out. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I have a story of the Miami Fusion, or I know where things are, just hit me up and I'll include it.
You should, and the next one should be a video. You should do like a full documentary at this point.
Keep that idea in the top of your head. I may or may not be working on something.
All right. Bob, as always, thank you for joining. Let everybody know where they can find you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I love coming on anytime you need to. I'll clear my schedule and come and talk soccer with you guys. You can find me at The Designated Pundits. That is our soccer podcast. You can find designated.pundits.com, youtube.com/@The Designated Pundits. You can find me at Bob V Soccer on Twitter or on the BetUS MLS show, which is starting up again this Tuesday after taking a few weeks off for break there. You can also find our stuff at goals.tv. That's goals, GOLZ with a Z. Thank you guys. It was great talking with you, and have a great week.
Yeah, make sure that you catch the Designated Pundits. They have a match day recap every week. So
recap every week, and we do predictions. I am the MLS bet guy. That's why I'm on the BetUS show. So Thursday we do predictions, talking about specifically who's going to win, who we should be betting on each and every week. And then Monday we have to talk about where we lost all our money.
And I think that that's what kills me about betting on soccer is the fact that the draws kill it.
But you also get better odds on the win. Like you can get plus 120 on a far favorited team, where in NFL you'll get minus 290. It's good because you get better odds.
I get it, but the draws kill me, man. But I get it. I get that makes the odds better.
If you listen to every episode of the Designated Pundits in the BetUS MLS show, you would be a greater better for it.
All right, much appreciated. And for those of you that don't know, I'm Daniel Granada. I do Battered Herons. We go on a couple times a week talking Inter Miami. We do it in English and in Spanish, so make sure you catch that if you haven't and you're looking for Inter Miami or like a lot of people, Messi talk. All right, if you are listening on audio, we appreciate you listening all the way to the end. Please do a 5-star comment, review, all that good stuff. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching all the way to the end. Please like, subscribe, share, tell your friends that there's a new MLS show. We go on every week. We have 5 MLS and content creators from across the league coming on talking all things MLS. So please do us a favor and jump on. And that's about it. So until the next one, have a good one.